And welcome back now from the growing anti-Zuma sentiments within the ANC to the looming legal showdown over the MK party's trademark. There's never a dull day in South Africa's political landscape. For a wrap of the week's political developments, we're joined now by political analyst Thamsanqa Malinga. A very good evening to you, Mr. Malinga. Thank you so much for speaking to us. So, what do you make of this? I mean, we've seen former President Thabo Mbeki address what he sees as the failures of the former President Jacob Zuma in terms of our democracy. In the past, we've seen the AC Youth League leader take jabs at him. Fikile Mbalula himself has had a lot to say about the former president. How do South Africans download and process what they're hearing? Is it purely about the persona of former President Jacob Zuma, or is it pointed to deep fissures within the ANC that is being pointed to the person of former President Jacob Zuma?
Good evening, Tsepiso, and good evening to the viewers at home. I think what's been happening with the comments that are directed at former President Jacob Zuma, especially with the latest one this past Wednesday coming from the former President Thabo Mbeki, that one, I think it doesn't come across as coming from the ANC because, one, he did not deliver it as a member of the ANC Veterans League and also as a former ANC president. You know, he delivered as the patron of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, so that did not do much harm to the ANC itself. But what South Africans, especially those who are aligning themselves with the MK party, are seeing as the ANC taking a step at the MK, are those comments that are actually coming from the active members of the ANC structures, be it the ANC Youth League, be it the SG, be it members of the ANC in the KZN province, or any other members of who are still very active within the ANC. Those ones are now, as you know, directed by the ANC to the former ANC, to the former ANC President Jacob Zuma, who's also seen as the ambassador of the MK party. And those are comments that are, very damaging to the ANC's campaign, and especially election campaign, where the ANC is actually shooting itself in the foot.
But how do you frame this to South Africans who are watching this? Obviously, during campaigning, things do get a bit personal, where some comments are seen as below the belt. But for me, the question is, do we have a dilemma of ethical political communication in South Africa, or are these well-made points that are backed up by facts?
Well, in most cases, in the South African context, we've always had, especially during the election season, we've always had instances where those who are electioneering are hitting below the belt. It has always been the trademark of the South African election period. You know, there's been that instances where people would just go off a tangent and hit below the belt. Our democracy and our electioneering and our politicians are not that seasoned to an extent that they would deal with issues that affect people. Our electioneering and especially between the parties that will be the top three parties tends to be very personal rather than sticking to issues. It tends to be very directed at a certain individual rather than always getting to the podium and dealing with the issues that affect people. You would rather come into the podium and deal with a person and the character of the person rather than saying this is what our manifesto and always sticking to your manifesto or your policies and what you're promising to the people. You want to go onto the podium and always attack the persona of the party.
So let's get into the wider issue of South African election campaign, given our unresolved race issues, complex social legacy. If we look at the DA and its election messaging, for instance, there's been criticisms. There has been, a deep dive into not only its policies, but its social complex in how it relays its messaging. The whole issue of trying to invite the United States to oversee South African elections has certainly stoked more than enough questions. So is it because of these deep-seated unresolved issues, or should we really be asking real questions about our transitional democracy, where it is, and the kind of messaging around it?
Yeah, I think one of the issues that we need to really get to understand is the issue of how do we move forward as a society and trying to build from where we started. I believe that the issue of the Rainbow Nation has been betrayed, if at all it existed, and that is very clear from where the DA stands. The issue of the DA writing to the West and saying, can you please come and observe our elections, has really cast the shadow in terms of how they see South Africa as a nation, and how they see South Africa going forward. And it really says for them, they are a party that really believes in a very, very separate South Africa. So it tells you that to an extent, we are not a country that politically has dealt with the past, and for me, that's why I've written and said this country, the rainbow has been the Rainbow Nation dream has been betrayed, and what the likes of Nelson Mandela stood for has really been betrayed, and it, if at all it existed. So we really need now to look back, and for the sake of those who are now coming in as the children who are now growing this day forward, and you need to sit down and look back and say, do we really live according to the ethos of those who stood in the queues of 1994 and said they really want to see a country that's united? And definitely it's not.
And just that moment the line gives up on us. Thank you so much for your time, Thamsanqa Malinga, who is a political analyst.